And what's changed since the IABC review of the cookbook?
The Company Culture Cookbook came out around about the same time that I was delighted to be able to be on the IABC Executive Board. And it came out, it was published by Financial Times Pitman, which is great, and the review was great. It said, here are 77 recipes. What's changed is those recipes were inside a book, which sold very well. I was delighted with, and it went into Russian, and it was the cookbooks in Chinese. What's changed is we're now living in a world where we can put those recipes online, we can change them and make them different the next day if something isn't working. We can bespoke it for an organization by putting it in their style, their feel. So the whole way of communicating, the whole way of learning has now radically changed. What hasn't changed is that instead of saying, I'm going to go on a week's course and learn how to do this, the way that people learn is small bite-sized chunks. So the ability to be able to put those bite-sized chunks onto the web in a learning mode where you can pick and choose and add and subtract and change the flavor and the color and the style and the way that it comes across, that has so radically changed that allows organizations to create the climate that they want to create in a way that it is bit by bit by bit, but it will all add up to a very big picture. So how do we do things around here? Well, you can go on and you can see it on a YouTube, you can see it in a learning module, you can see it in the way that we're communicating. So everything has radically changed. People haven't changed. We just have a much, much better way now of getting those climate changes across.
Give me an example of one of your executive chef masterclasses.
A really good example of the executive chef masterclasses was one that I held in Sofia in Bulgaria just before the annual internal communication conference by Apiron there. And the masterclass basically covers an overall strategy which says, here are the communities, here's our 4 types of communities, and here are the types of messages that we're getting to those communities. And so how do we put those together so that marketing, communication, and HR are all working in sync to create a brand internally that also then moves out externally. So the real critical bit of that is, which is why we come back to being an executive chef, is there is an overall strategy required. But then you can move into the fun bit of what are we actually saying, what are we actually doing, how are we actually doing it, and how is it coming across to each of those 4 communities. And by looking at this as an overall picture, as an executive overview, and then getting, which is the cultural part, and then actually getting into the what we do, the way we do it, how we do it, and the excitement that we can talk about that creates that. So the masterclass gives you an opportunity to not just look at the overall picture, but also to actually get into the detail. We actually were able to look at brand Bulgaria at the time, and what was really fascinating with Bulgaria as a brand was that Bulgaria had just spent 7.5 million euros on a TV campaign which 7.5 million people didn't like. So what they actually wanted to do, what they were trying to get across, was the old culture, the old climate that could be any one of the Balkan countries. And yet Bulgaria's got 7.5 million people who, if they had been exponents of Bulgaria the brand and talking to people worldwide, they could have really changed the whole approach, which is what we talked about on, so taking a real example like brand Bulgaria or your organization and saying what could we do differently to make things look differently. That's really what the masterclass is all about, is actually getting people involved in something real, something that they know and they can touch and feel and see and hear.